I'm so excited to show you this space today. This is one of the most interesting, unique, probably iconic places that you can stay in the UK. Through all of these new and unique and interesting stays, this place has been sat here the entire time, modestly just kind of being itself. So let's go and take a look inside. This is the chapel at Walcott Hall. When we first entered the chapel, we had no idea of the story we were going to learn about while we were here. When you enter this space, you can immediately see that this is no normal stay. This is no normal place that you can stay. This is different. It's different to the others. It has something deeper that a lot of new Airbnbs and new builds and new interesting stays just don't have. The chapel sits hidden amongst the trees in the arboretum above Walcott Hall. But it wasn't always here, and how it got here is a really interesting story. But let's start at the beginning. The chapel sleeps 4 people across 2 bed areas, and while it's definitely accommodation, it still keeps that interesting chapel feel. This space has atmosphere. It has something that you can't build. On each side of the building, there are these huge floor-to-ceiling rustic-looking windows which let light just pour into the downstairs space. When we look closer and see the details on this spiral staircase, for example, we start to get some clues as to where this place gets its atmosphere from. It's almost as if it has a quiet confidence, the kind where it's really impressive, but it also feels like it doesn't need to try. I think that's what you get when somewhere really is authentic and the real deal. I feel like that's what's happening here. These sofas are old and kind of unapologetic. They've been sat on a lot. This whole building is like that. It is old, it is used, and it's got this feel to it that's basically saying, I'm just me, I'm just this old building, and this is my vibe, and it's a good vibe. This is one of those spaces that when you walk inside, it's almost as if the outside just disappears, and you feel like it's just you and whatever it is that you're doing. As you look around the space, you can see there's distressed wood, there's paint missing from the wood panels, and it doesn't look like that was done on purpose. It looks like this is recycled wood from somewhere, and that's really what I'm trying to get to with this space. It feels authentic, it is the real deal. It is a beautiful space, and it's all those little details that make you realize that. Usually at this point, I move from one room to another. But this open plan feels seamless. It doesn't feel like 2 things joined together openly. It feels like one space. The kitchen feels like a very classic kind of cottage country kitchen that you're quite familiar with here in the British countryside. Things like the Rayburn, the ceramic sink. This looks like the exact Rayburn that I had growing up. Not me, my parents had it. So this is immediate nostalgia for me. These are always on. These warm the space. You can lift these things up here, and these are for cooking on. But they can sometimes be a little slower. So there is also a gas oven here. Less traditional, but probably more functional. The kitchen has everything that you'd need and expect in a self-catering accommodation. It has a microwave, a fridge, a bin, a sink, everything really. Cutlery, pans, pots, knives, everything that you'd expect. But it has something more. Maybe I'm just picking up some nostalgia, but maybe this is just what it feels like when somewhere is real. I just love this space. I love the way the floor and the ceiling kind of frame the back of the room like it's a movie. It kind of feels like a widescreen movie. If you're doing things in this space, it just feels almost cinematic, and not just through the camera. I mean, actually when you're in here. For us, filming this space, it's about halfway through the day. Now, this is usually when we start to use the space as if we were just people staying in it. We have to start cooking. We have to start eating because it's lunchtime. And I think this might be a good time for me to try and put across on video what this place feels like when you're actually there.
Feel like a stone in a well. No one can find me here. Pretending it's not at all, and so I can just stay in here. You know what's even worse? It's me who made you run away for good. You left me alone. No words, goodbyes, just drones. And you'll be
Every object in this space starts to feel like it holds some kind of secret. Initially, I just saw decorations, but when I looked closer, I saw things got much more interesting. Can you see that on the wall? Those are called samplers. This is how youngsters would practice their needlework back in the Victorian times, and some of these are 200 years old. This one, Elizabeth Ann Wilson, 1829. 1819. When you see things of this age on the wall, it starts to make you wonder, where on earth did this chapel come from?
You have the living room area on one side of the space and you have the kitchen area on the other side of the space. There is a bathroom on the other end of the building, which we'll take a look at in a little while. But separating the living room and the kitchen is this spiral staircase that takes you upstairs to the mezzanine, where there are 2 beds. So let's head up the spiral staircase and take a look upstairs. So upstairs, it's kind of split into 2 halves. You've got a bedroom on this side, and you've got a bedroom on that side. And you've got this really unique kind of mezzanine bridge that connects the 2 sides together. And it is interesting. It is cool. It is very different to anywhere else I've ever seen, because you've got these curtains that divide up the 2 spaces at the top. So you've got a bedroom on this side and you've got a bedroom on that side, and you can pull these curtains down to kind of separate the 2 spaces.
As is becoming quite common with this space, this is unique and different, quite different to anything that I've seen so far on my travels while photographing these kind of spaces. Behind the bed is a beautiful stained glass window. This looks beautiful on the inside, but also has a reverse effect later on, which you will see. Windows are a really interesting feature of this space. They're all different and they're dotted all over the space.
The light is fading right now, but you can see we've got these ceiling lights where the daylight just kind of pours through and down here. But if you look at the windows, they're all covered in moss and cobwebs and things like that. And I feel like, again, this is the space just not apologizing for what it is. It feels like it's earned those things. The moss on the windows, the metal frames, it feels like it's earned that stuff. And on these windows, the moss is actually on the inside, which is just even cooler. It just adds to the kind of adventurous vibe of this space. This is a place that you share with everything else in the country.
This is a clear sign that the chapel absolutely belongs where it is. It's been welcomed in by the surrounding ecosystem.
The bed is comfy, the linen is clean, bright and white. So even though we've got kind of like wildlife and things reclaiming parts of the building and making it feel like it belongs in the woods, on the inside, actually everything is very clean, very fresh. And they obviously do a great job here of keeping things that way.
Now we'll make our way across the mezzanine bridge from this bedroom to the other bedroom. It's very similar, but it's different. This is what I was saying. It's not symmetrical, but it is symmetrical. There is plenty of natural light and lamplight, and a perfectly placed reading chair surrounded by interesting little windows.
Then over here, we've got my favorite feature. I love a cast iron radiator.
Each bedroom feels like a place to retreat to, and even though it's a mezzanine, it definitely separates itself from the downstairs space. And even with the curtain, each bedroom feels separate.
There's something about it that I just absolutely love. The way that it makes it feel like an adventure is really special to me.
When you arrive at Walcott Hall, you head up the drive, up past the lakes, and these lakes have an interesting history for me. I spent many years here as a kid, watching my dad fish, playing around the lakes. The grounds of Walcott Hall are interesting in themselves. But from here, from the car park, you can see where the chapel is on the little map, and you can see all of the other interesting places that they've got at this location. Maybe we'll cover those in another video. As you make your way up through the Arboretum, past all of the beautiful old trees, on this misty day in the United Kingdom, the chapel reveals itself. And I think now is probably a good time to talk about where on earth this chapel came from. I want you to imagine something. It's 1894, and a small, simple chapel is built from corrugated iron in Muxton in Shropshire, which is around 40 miles from Walcott. It stands for over 100 years and is used as a makeshift church. Generations come and go, and the small chapel presumably becomes a part of many people's lives. But after more than 100 years of service, a new modern church is built in the village in the late 90s. It would seem the fate of this small chapel is sealed. It would be demolished and scrapped. But the owners of Walcott Hall caught wind of this and bought the structure for £1,000. This old makeshift Victorian chapel found a new loving home on their Georgian estate, where it was reassembled amongst the English oaks and chestnuts of the Walcott Hall Arboretum. I can see that there is much credit due to the woodworkers who restored the chapel so beautifully. It wasn't just put back together. They presumably added much of its elegant features like the extra windows and many of the other embellishments. It feels like the chapel has matured from a simple chapel into something elegant and grand. It now stands proudly in the Arboretum at Walcott Hall. But because Walcott Hall is a busy wedding venue, the chapel now gets to be part of everyone's big day. You will often see the chapel as the backdrop to many people's wedding photos. And I find that kind of poetic. How this simple chapel that was going to be scrapped is now the main feature in many people's wedding photos.
I think if I was to properly describe what the chapel feels like and try and bring it all in and just describe it in one sentence, I would say that it feels somewhere between a fairy tale and a movie. When you're in here, the space just kind of makes it feel like everything that's happening is an immediate memory, a core memory that is going to be in your mind forever. Maybe that's overdramatic, but that's the kind of thing that it feels like when you're in here.
As the damp, rainy, misty evening draws in, it's time to light the fire and get cozy up at the chapel. And then it's time to do something that might surprise you. You see, at evening time in these kind of spaces, I always do one thing. I get started making this video. So a huge thank you to this chapel for having us, the chapel that started its life about 130 years ago. Thanks very much, and I'm glad you made your way to Walcott Hall.
This has to be one of my favourite places that I've toured. If you want to book this space, I'll leave a link to the chapel at Walcott Hall in the description. And if you want to discover loads of new and interesting places that you can stay, I've got loads more videos on the channel, so check out some of those. And if you want to catch my future videos, you know what to do. You can hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.